we have a small. That way we all know who each other are, because will admit that I know some faces, but I don't know a few names. So I'm Autumn Greene. I'm the accessibility coordinator here at the college, and this is
Don Lesperance. I think I've worked with all of you. I oversee e-learning and accessibility services in the testing center and state authorization for this.
Susan. Can you introduce
and other duties at the time?
I'm Susan Steele. I can't talk that, but physical life movement and sports science.
Yeah.
I'm Kelsey Grafton. I am the visiting instructor.
Woo.
I'm Tracy Noyes with the camp program, the retention specialist.
Tracy Birdsell with camp, talent search. Yeah. Student Success Center and the Warrior.
She's who beats me.
She's the winner.
I don't think so. I think we're even. Oh, it looks like you have some.
Oh, yeah. I'm Marla De La Galliano from the Center for Teaching and Learning, and Christina. We're just introducing ourselves.
Hello, I gathered that. I'm Christina Brando-Subis with Teacher Education and Mathematics.
So now that we have time on Zoom, we'll need to share the screen. You can.
Perfect.
That's okay.
Now I can do that.
You can do it from there.
My apologies. I had planned to come over, but I've been working with students right up until now.
No, we're glad you're here.
Yeah, we're really glad.
Most disabled
Oh, all
participants
right.
free sharing.
I can help with that.
So yeah, that seems like a you issue.
Yeah.
So yeah, we do have a formal presentation that we're kind of going to go through all today. But if you have questions during any of it, please just jump in, raise your hand, just talk. We're fine with any of that. Because we want to make sure that we're answering questions. I mean, that's the whole point for being here today.
Yep.
Do screen one.
This one?
No, it's
Oh, this
better
one.
if you do screen one
Okay.
and then slide the talking heads over.
Perfect.
They
Oh, they slide themselves.
All right.
Beautiful.
Perfect. And then you might need to click back on the PowerPoint to get the mouse. Okay.
Awesome sauce. Great. All right. So today we're just going to go over some basic ADA law. Sometimes it's just nice to know when I have to be the bad guy and say, well, that's legally what we have to do. That's why it is actual. We're going to talk about the accommodations process, which is a lot of what Autumn does. And then just some guidance for instructors in academic programs, how to refer, how to implement those accommodations, and then navigating questions, concerns on your half or with the student as we go forward.
Okay, I'll take it away. So really why we're here, everybody, is because I have had some faculty reach out and say, it would be really, really helpful if we could have a presentation where we can ask questions and maybe get some clarifying information. Sometimes when I send a faculty notification, the accommodation may not apply to your course. And sometimes that's difficult for faculty to kind of read between the lines and kind of understand what they have. So that's why we're here, really. I really want it to be an ask and answer type of forum where you guys can ask any questions you have, because I know you sometimes do. And then Dawn and I can answer those. And we have the experts here that can answer those for you. Okay, so really that's why we're here. And we did this presentation is because faculty have asked. And so we are really excited about that because it is a partnership. We absolutely are on faculty side. Obviously, we're reviewing medical documentation. We have to accommodate these students legally. But it's a partnership. We are not sending the students into your classroom with a smoking gun saying, you must do this for this student. But we are telling you, the student has barriers that we've verified via documentation. They've got a different learning style. Hopefully this piece of paper kind of turns a light bulb on for you. And my student has a different learning style. This is going to help me meet them where they are. So it's not a bad thing. It's just that we have to accommodate these students. So again, that's really why we're having this meeting today, this presentation. So we like to cover federal law, why we have accommodations at the college level, because we are an entity that receives government funding. And so because of that, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, the ADA, and then the ADA Amendments Act says that as a government funding receiving entity, we must accommodate these students who have this medical documentation. So, and I'm sure you guys are all aware of that. Okay.
And then something too that you might hear, just because I do walk that line, probably, I think all of you, maybe not you, Kelsey, have had to do the mandated training we had a couple of years ago for ADA, for accessibility in the online environment. that is part of the amendments, but it's actually been amended since then to include more online, to include websites, more of the WCAG stuff that we see. And so sometimes you'll get documentation for a student say that they're low vision. And so you'll have PowerPoints posted, and then an instructional designer will reach out and say, we understand you have a student with an accommodation. You have a lot of PowerPoints in your class. Let me help you. Or you can reach out to them and say, can you help me make my PowerPoints so they're more accessible to my students? Because PowerPoint's a weird one. Word docs are easy. Excel is relatively easy. PowerPoint's a nightmare. And so working with your instructional designer to meet these legal requirements is part of that as well.
So we just like to define disability. And again, what that means to us and the law. So the law says disability means anyone that identifies with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits a major life activity. It has a record of impairment. So again, that medical documentation, or they have identified as with a disability since they were a young child. Because again, not all disabilities are visible. Some of them are invisible.
And
then
that does also include temporary disabilities. So we have a lot of athletes who get concussed.
Yep.
That would be something that we would look at legally as a disability as well.
and then being regarded as having such impairment. So again, those disabilities that are hidden. Okay, so again, just like to give you guys info, 61 million adults in the US live with a disability. 26%, 1 in 4 have some type. So we're dealing with students on our campus. As you have probably seen or encountered, we have students who have physical disabilities, mental disabilities, visible and invisible disabilities. I'm sure you guys have experienced that. So it comes in all forms.
And then includes learning disabilities as well.
And then this is just some, again, more info we like to give you so that you guys have an idea of how many students are coming to college and actually are identifying with the Disability Services Office. 19% of undergrads have reported it, and 11% of post-bac students have reported having a disability. So,
Do we have LC stats here?
I
can.
do. Yes. I do.
There. Okay. So we'll talk about that when we get up there.
Yep.
There, hey,
There
right
they
there.
are. So I've been here since fall 19. So that's why I have these numbers up here, because, you know, prior to that, I don't contact student counseling and figure out their numbers. They had a different Medicat system. It was just all different. But since I've been here in fall of 19, we have served in an accommodation capacity, whether that's housing. So again, that may not ever deal with you, but it deals with us, right? We have to review the documentation. We have to put them through our process. Housing, dietary. Again, we have tons of students who have a medical condition where they cannot eat at our Sodexo. Our Sodexo cannot accommodate them. So again, we are dealing with those students, reviewing their documentation and exempting them from meal plans. So dietary, housing, and then academic accommodations. Since I've been here fall 19, we have served I have served 882 students. So,
And that includes 165 just this semester. We still have students that are coming in.
every day.
We're just under 3%, because we have to report to IFEDS if we're over 3% for our accommodations for our students with disabilities. We are like 2.8 and a half. Like we are knocking at the door at 3%, where we would have to let the government know that we have more accommodation students than they, not really allowed, but over the normal, which is that 3%. So
If you did. Would they?
I think there's some funding involved. We would get a little bump in that. They just pay a little more attention, because then they're going to want to know what we're doing and how we're accommodating our students, how we're making these determinations and that kind of thing. So.
Yep. So our role of the office, it's obviously to increase equal opportunities and access to all programs and services at LC State. So again, that's anything from extracurricular activities. They want to join a club, they want to be a part of something. And then of course, in the classroom, we want to make sure that they're able to go to any events, debate events, something off campus. And then of course, we want them to be able to participate in the classroom, just like a mainstream student. And then we're dedicated to creating accessible and inclusive environments for all students, employees, and community members with disabilities. So again, you know, we house questions from community members. We house questions from fellow faculty, from other staff members. So we we are all about accessibility, and accessibility is everybody's job. So we love when people ask about it because it just means that you've heard about it and it's something that is getting you're interested in. So we love the questions.
And we do provide accommodations for students and faculty and staff out of our office. And so like if you guys were to need an accommodation, like a chair or a desk lift or something like that, you would work with HR, and then HR would get a hold of Autumn and say, okay, I've met with this person, they do have this, we need to figure this out. And then Autumn would be the one to actually give that accommodation and fulfill that.
So let me ask you something. If somebody needed a chair, for instance,
Yeah.
a faculty member, would the division purchase it? Do you have?
If
funds?
it's tied to, I mean, if the division has the money to pay for it and it's not a documented, it's just, this chair makes my back hurt. If it's not a documented disability, then that would be something the division would generally cover. I can't imagine the college wouldn't cover it. But we get $42,000 a year. And that 42,000 covers any student accommodations we have to pay for. So if we have VRI, if we have to get a student translator, so we've had students in the past who are visually impaired, we'll spend $20,000 in a semester on having somebody come down from Coeur d'Alene because you have to meet certain licensure in the state of Idaho. So the 42 has to cover all of that. It would cover any tools that we would need to buy, chairs, technology, that kind of thing. It's one of those backfill accounts though, that if we went over, the money would be there, but we do have a budget for that. So if it was something that was documented and they went through HR, then we would purchase that. But if you're sitting on a bunch of money and you want to buy a chair, we would certainly buy it.
Yeah, so Vicky, you guys, if it is an employee accommodation, you guys will work directly with Vicky. I won't know anything. She'll house the documentation, she'll approve the accommodation, she'll then work with our office to purchase that accommodation. So, or if we have one, we have standing desks, we have other furniture accessible furniture that maybe we already have in inventory that we would bring to. Yes, we have a budget for that and we will accommodate our employees. Partnership with Title IX. So this is mostly dealing with pregnant women on our campus, which we have had a few, and then parenting students. So we've got some lactation rooms. We partner with Ashley Hole and Title IX to just make sure that we're accommodating everybody.
And we're actually getting ready to put another one of those in the library. So
those are just little.
Is it in the sub?
So right now we have one, it's in Reed Centennial Hall on the second floor down by the elevator. We have 2 bathrooms at the end of the hall in the library that are staff bathrooms currently. Those are going to become unisex bathrooms where we have a lot of trans students on our campus right now. And we want a place for them to feel like they can go without having to encounter anybody who has a different opinion. And then the women's bathroom actually has a second little room just kind of attached to it. And so that's going to be the second lactation room on campus.
It's really
I'm
nice.
trying to find one on that side now too, somewhere like Spalding, Sam Glen over there. So stay tuned for that.
Could faculty get updates on where all of those things are too, so we can pass them along to our students?
Yes, and Ashley Hull actually keeps a master list and a master map of where those things are. We also have a map of where all the accessible entrances are, elevators, ramps, that kind of stuff. And so they'll end up on that map. What we're hoping is that by the end of the semester, we really have those things located and situated, and we'll have Logan share those out in the Monday minutes and then send it to Debbie to have her published to the students.
That might be a helpful resource to put on our Canvas
Yep.
CTL
Yeah.
page.
Certainly.
Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna jump into accommodations, kind of common accommodations we approve, what those are, and then you guys can ask any questions you have about those. So accommodations remove barriers experienced by individuals with disabilities. And then we just gave you a little blurb there. When we design for disability first, we often stumble upon solutions that are not only inclusive, but are also often better than when we design for the norm. So it's again, just always create things with accessibility in mind.
So when you buy, so this is a good example. OXO, they sell them at Walmart. They have a whole line of kitchen things. You'll notice that they're all bulkier. They were designed for accessibility, but a ton of people use them. And that's the kind of how we look at it. Curb cutouts are another example of that. So something that was designed for accessibility, but really makes life better for everybody.
Okay, so reasonable accommodations. They are determined on an individualized basis. So every student who has accommodations, has met with me, has provided some form of documentation. And then, of course, what the accommodations do, are they mitigate those barriers. What accommodations don't do is they don't alter course requirements or learning outcomes or pose a fundamental alteration of the program. We also would not give a student an unfair advantage. I didn't put that on there, but something that would give your student an unfair advantage over another student, such as a study guide. I've been asked by students for a study guide. But what is a study guide at the college level? Your notes and going to class and listening to lecture, right? And so it sounded like the student's barrier was that they could not take notes good enough to create their own study guide. So how I accommodated that student was I approved a note-taking accommodation. I wouldn't be able to just go to the faculty and say, hey, you need to create a study guide for this one student. That would give him or her an unfair advantage. So again, it's all on an individualized basis. We're not here to alter the course to give them an unfair advantage or to in any way change the requirements of the course. And then, of course, they're not retroactive. And this is one we really, really want to get out there and everyone's aware. I have students still meeting with me today. I'm approving accommodations today. But I am very clear when I tell a student or I send an email that accommodations are not retroactive, that they're implemented from today forward, and that anything that they're in crisis mode about for the first 4 weeks, I know we're in like week 12 now, right? So anything I tell them, I'm very transparent with our students. Anything for the first 12 weeks, accommodations will not cover. They're not retroactive. If you have a crisis right now in class, that's between you and professor. So we are very transparent with our students. Obviously, we encourage that they meet the first week of the semester, the first couple weeks of the semester, so that it's a smooth sailing semester and that they have accommodations in place for the whole time. Yeah.
So like a note-taking accommodation, is that just getting notes from another student?
We can do those 3 ways.
We have
So
options.
we have options. So our first line is always in-class note taker. So if we can find somebody who's already enrolled into class, we give them $8.50 an hour. It's not a lot, but we pay them to go to class every day and provide their notes to that student. They just make a copy of them and give them to that student. We also have a VRI option, which is just virtual interpretation through Note Taking Express, where they record the lecture, then they upload that recording to the system, and the system makes them a transcript. So then they have the notes printed out that way as well. And then we have had faculty who just give them notes. They're like, here's the note.
Instructor's notes.
But that's really up to the faculty to do that. A good number of our faculty are not comfortable with that. So we have those conversations that make that work. This kind of ties in with the one too, with the undue burden. We've had students before who are taking like chemistry or some like electrical is a good example, where they're colorblind and they expect us to provide the glasses, the chroma glasses. That's not something we can provide, like they're expensive. And so that's something we would expect the student to bring. Another example of that would be aids. So we've had some people who have come in and said, my son had an aid in high school, he needs one at college, and we know right out of that. It's just, we can't, it's hugely expensive to have that available. 2, as you probably all tried to hire somebody recently, there's nobody that wants to do that kind of work. It's really hard to find people who are trained in that area who are willing to do that. And so what we tell them is that if that's something your student needs, you need to provide that. So we'll have parents come, we do have some people who, when they get here, they already know they're going to need that person, and they're just looking for approval for Bob to sit next to him during class. So it really just depends on that. So there are things in there that there's wiggle room, but there are some things that like we just can't do. And then backing up a little bit to the unfair advantage, we've had students come in and ask, I have a 100-question test, and that's very anxious for me. Can I take a 50-question test? We're like, absolutely not. So we do get asked, and that is something that, I know that instructors have brought that up to me in the past. So like, they want me to change what I'm doing, and by no means will we support that. So
So I have a question. On the one where you have the note taker and then they give the notes to the student, do you have a requirement that the student is actually in class?
yes,
Yes,
if they
we
are
do.
not in class, they don't get the notes for that day.
Yeah.
Unless there is some medical reason that they missed that we are aware of.
So with the note-taking accommodation, Tracy, there are 3 options, but we are very open with our students that if it's the instructor notes, it's to supplement your learning, and it may not be an option. You may get to class, turn in this notification, have the conversation with your instructor, and they may tell you, I have no notes to give you. And this is a conversation we have with our students. We are very transparent that it's to supplement your learning. You still have to go to class and be the best student you can be and put your best foot forward and learn the skills, because college is a place where you're building skills. We're not experts at everything, and that's why we're here, to become experts, right? That's why you're going after a degree. You want to be an expert in that field. And so we're very transparent and clear with them that the instructor notes are to supplement your learning. They may already be uploaded in Canvas as PowerPoints and other things. It may not be anything more than the mainstream student has access to. So if you really, really have a barrier, and we of course review that with medical documentation or prior accommodations, we tell them that the 2 other options are probably your better option. So again, we never want a student to come into class and you look at something and be like, how am I going to provide that accommodation? I never want you to feel like I can't do this. So if you ever have a question, reach out. But I want you to know today that we're very clear with students that instructors' notes is to supplement their learning, and there may not be any instructor notes. So that's why we're here.
Ever a time where an instructor, I tell my students often, grab a little voice recorder.
Yep.
and-
Yep.
but Can an
We
instructor?
have some instructors who
tell
do not
them,
like that. Yes.
we do.
I
We-
have
and-
pushback,
yeah.
and I think, you have 30 other students in there, they're all hearing the same thing, so why not?
These are the meetings that end up in my office. So the accommodations that Autumn approves for each student are recommendations. These are the things that we think will help the student be the most successful. We do have some instructors who, under no certain terms, I mean, I can think of 5 off the top of my head, that they do not want their recordings or their lectures recorded.
Right.
They just don't. And so that's when we work with them to say, okay, let's not record the lecture, but let's get a note taker in the class, like another student, because then it's not word for word. We've had students in the past, or faculty in the past, who'd say, I won't give you my notes and I don't want you, or don't want you to record my lectures, but I'll give you notes. And so it's really having that conversation to find middle ground that will help the student. But I mean, absolutely, we've had situations where no has been a perfectly reasonable answer.
Yeah, and to piggyback off what Dawn said, some of these accommodations, like when we have a student with a memory impairment, okay, and it's a TBI, a documented memory impairment. They were in an accident and they've got some memory issues. They, as a young child, maybe, they had some birthing issues and they have a documented memory issue and they need a 3x5 note card. We're very clear with our students and our faculty that faculty, so first of all, they have to get their note card approved before an exam. So if you ever see that accommodation, we are very clear and we say it on the notification that it must be reviewed and approved by instructor prior to use on the exam. It also has to be turned in with the exam. We also tell our students, if you come to a test, if you don't get that approved, obviously you can't use it. But when they go and meet with you and you look at this note card and it's something that's not something to jog their memory, you hold the key. You can black out anything you want and say, that's not allowed on this note card. So it's a partnership. It's not, again, it's not me giving a student a 3x5 note card and they can write whatever they want on it, right? It's that they must work with their faculty, build that relationship. And then again, you guys get to know your student, their learning style, and how to best accommodate them and make sure that they're successful. And that's my hope, is that you want all your students to be successful. That is what I tell all my students. So that's where we're at. So this is the process, application. We have that interactive process. We notify faculty. They notify you guys, they come and talk to you, and then you guys implement. So that's the process. Application. So our process will be changing soon, but right now it is pretty old school. Okay, we don't have an online system or anything like that. So a student submits an intake form and provides verifying documentation. So we have 2 steps to our process right now, the documentation and then our intake form. And then we have an intake appointment. I have an intake appointment with the student. That's where we have that interactive interview. We look at the documentation, we review their intake form to kind of get a feel for how they view their disability affecting them. Because sometimes looking at documentation, fine, you have the documented disability, but how in the grind is the student really struggling? And so we review those things, talk, and then we approve warranted accommodations based on that interactive process. Then we send the faculty notification for a face-to-face course with the student. We tell them it's a requirement that they must go talk with their instructor. And then, of course, if it's an online class, we're going to email you guys and we're going to be very open, and we include the student on the email so that that conversation can start happening.
Now, I will say we do have students, so we're a small school and faculty compare notes. So if they're in my class and your class and your class, and they're using accommodation in your class, and you know that they're in your class, and you say, how are you addressing this accommodation? They may not use their accommodation in your class.
Yeah.
We leave that up to them. We write them a note for every class that they're in. SD 107 is a good example. So I have a student in my class this semester who has an accommodation for double time on exams. Well, I don't have an exam in that class. So obviously that's not a factor. So that doesn't apply to me. And so when you get those notifications, just know that even though the student is in 5 other classes, they're probably using that letter a little differently in every class.
Do they have to have these letters every semester?
Yes, they have to check back in with us with autumn. Every semester they have to have these reevaluated, because sometimes they'll come in and say, you know, I had double time on my exams. I'm not using all that time. We'll scale them back. We'll give them time and a half, and sometimes they'll come in and say, I just really need a little more time, and we'll extend that. We'll move them from private room to the general testing area at the testing center and vice versa, or from the classroom to the testing center or vice versa. And so that's the point of that, is reevaluating, because certainly freshmen come in and they're like, I need all the things, and we don't give them all the things, but we start them out somewhere that they have room to adjust as they need to and as they're feeling comfortable.
You keep audiobooks for like other
Some.
students' books?
Yes.
Some, yes.
So
We
can-
really encourage our students that when they order their textbooks, if they know they're going to need them electronically, to order them electronically. We do have the capabilities of making standard text audio or readable. It takes a little longer and it costs a little money. So
Yeah, in addition, I would just say that, you know, any accommodation that we're approving, if you have questions, please reach out. I don't get enough faculty to reach out. You know, sometimes I'll get a few phone calls and then we can talk about it, but, you know, and I want you guys to feel like I'm accessible and that you can talk to me, because it's a partnership. I want to hear from you. Sometimes I hear from other faculty, like, could you maybe change the notification to look like this? Sure, absolutely. I want to hear from you. I'm giving you a notification. However, I can help you understand it. Please give me feedback. So yeah,
You only send out emails when
it's
it's
online.
Or
Is
it's
there a
like,
reason for that, as opposed to?
because campus students, we want them to be having conversations with their instructors. We very much push self-advocation.
Yep.
We want the student to take ownership of their disability and figure out and work with their instructors the best way. Because we've had times where we've had an instructor say, you know, we'll send the student to them and say, they have an accommodation of a note taker, for example. Well, maybe they don't really need a note taker, and the instructor is willing to, I'm going to send you my notes. I'll send you the PowerPoint ahead of class time so you can review it before class. So then you come to class more prepared. And so we've had instructors who've really stepped in and kind of bypassed some of that. So having those conversations is very important in a face-to-face class. We do encourage our online students, like she said, we copy them on those emails to have those conversations still, even with their distance professors. But for us, it's just easier to email them than the student having to find all the emails and do all the emailing, because sometimes they miss somebody and then that's a thing. And
we just make the initial connection. And we say in our email, Kelsey, we say that you must, we're starting this conversation. We've included the student on the email. Please start that conversation. It's a little bit more professional sounding
Yeah.
than that, but. And then another reason that we meet with students every semester, because at the end of the day, this is a vulnerable population of students. Okay, let's just be honest. We're working with a very vulnerable group of students. They are coming from the high school where the law was different. They were covered by the Individual Disability Education Act that says, get students through, whatever it takes. You can modify, you can alter, you can do whatever you want. Get them through. It's about their success. At college, it's about equal access. And I don't tell students or parents or family that at college, it's not about your student success, because why would I tell them that? But their success is going to be based on them. Yes, we're going to be there to support them and encourage them and accommodate them. but if the success is on the student, and we can't alter the course. We can't fundamentally change course requirements because they're getting an accredited degree that has weight, right? And so I want you to be aware of that. Coming from high school, they're covered under a different law and they can modify and change and do whatever they want. They can turn a 50-question test into 25 questions. They can take 4 multiple choice questions and only give the student 2 to choose from. They can chunk assignments. They can take assignments away, right? And so when students get to college and parents, they're like, who's going to talk to the faculty member for my student? And I say, that's a skill that your student's going to be working on here at the college level, is self-advocacy.
And we do offer too that if a student is really concerned about a faculty, some of our faculty have reputations, which is true at any college or university. They'll say, I have to talk to this faculty. I'm really nervous about it. And we can go with them if they'd like us to, or we can have those meetings in one of our offices. And we've done that in the past too. And that's been fine. So.
And then we just need to be realistic about the population of students we serve, right?
Yep.
We serve 80% Idaho students, right? That's the statistics we have. And Idaho students are coming from rural backgrounds, first generation college students. So we just have to be realistic about the students we're serving and know that, yeah, you are going to get faculty notifications. We will have students that we need to support because of the population of students that we realistically are having at our institution.
Can I ask a question, kind of building up the difference between high school
Yeah,
and college
absolutely.
accommodations? I'm wondering about the difference between undergraduate and graduate school accommodations.
There's no difference.
Okay, so
Once you've hit the collegiate level is the collegiate level. If it's an AS, BS, MS, doctorate, it's all the same kind of procedure to get accommodations.
do you think then it would be as common? So I have students who have disability accommodations right now that are planning to go to graduate school.
Yeah.
And they'll have, quite a few disability related absences, for example. My experience in grad school was people usually didn't miss class, almost nobody ever missed a class. And so I'm just, the student and I were kind of wondering,
Yeah, that's a great question.
the climate, legally, I understand it's the same. Do you think
Yeah.
the climate might feel different?
I'm working on a doctorate now, and I have a couple students I've been in classes with that they have physical disabilities where they've missed some classes,
Mhm.
and our instructors have been really great about it.
Okay.
So
I think
Good.
at least at my college, and I mean, I've worked at 3 universities, and that's been my experience in all of those programs as
Great.
well. So
Yeah.
really what it comes down to is, what we say in e-learning is it's while it is you are contractual, contractually obligated legally to do these things, it's also the right thing to do.
Right.
And educators are generally really good about that because we all want the students to succeed.
Yeah.
We want them to be successful and move forward in their lives. And so, I think people are pretty good about that. So,
That's great.
but it is an uphill battle. So that's
It can be.
one thing I want to be very transparent with everybody is, our freshmen are coming in thinking, and it's amazing to me how many families and support teams and parents have no idea the differences high school to college, and that I'm the bearer of bad news and I'm breaking the news.
you make a lot of people
You
cry.
guys, I go to high schools and present. I do everything I can to get the word out, right? I go to CHS, Lapway. I just had a presentation this week at CHS. We tried to get the word out, but I would tell you 7 out of 10 families and parents and support teams that are walking in my office, July and August and June, they have no idea. They literally think that their accommodations from high school are going to look exactly the same in college. And it just doesn't. Like, how could I tell you that a student, Joe is going to just take 2 of your tests this semester and that you need to figure out how to grade that? We can't do that. And so
All their art is going to be watercolor, nothing else.
it's a very uphill battle for us. We are battling and we try to make it as easy as we can for when they get to your classroom. We've already broken the news to them. We've already broken hearts and had the tear moment and built them back up. So just know, we know how difficult it is for you guys. It's difficult for us at times too.
So we're going to blow through it probably the next couple here just quickly, but if a student ever asked you directly, I don't have accommodations, but in the past I've had instructors help me with this thing. It's totally up to you to run your class how you want to in that regards. However, I will say if something goes wrong or the student doesn't like how you're accommodating them outside of our office, we can get an OCR complaint for that. And that's not going to fall on our office. That's going to fall on you. And so we try to tell our faculty as much as we can, if you have students who need accommodations, let them have a conversation with us. That's coverage for you guys, it's coverage for the student, it's coverage for us, for the college. But if you have somebody that, like you're doing quizzes at the end of class and they're like, it just takes me a second to read through it. If you want to give them 5 minutes extra at the end of class to read through, that's perfectly acceptable and up to you. But I would say if it's any markedly huge, change in the class or the time allowed or assignments, I would really direct them to our office just for that safeguard. So this is the question you asked about if faculty can say no. Again, you can't say, no, I absolutely won't let the student use any accommodations. We have to provide that to our students, but that's when we have that conversation saying, okay, you won't allow a note card, but would you allow this? And so that's where those conversations are so important, because they do lead to OCR violations. We've been very lucky since I took over in, I think it's 2019, I don't even know, a couple years ago. We haven't had any, we've had 1 or 2 come a little close just based on the students' feelings, not by anything that we had done. And I feel fairly confident that had it gone to that situation, we would have been fine. But the school has had those in the past. And so we're just trying to do the best we can to educate faculty and staff and students of their rights and their responsibilities so that we are not any of these people. So
For you, honor code.
yes, I love the honor code. This is what I'm writing my dissertation over. So really the biggest thing about accommodations is confidentiality. You should never ask personal questions about a disability. All the student is obligated to tell you is, I have a disability, these are the accommodations I've been given by AS. That's it. A lot of them will overshare, so you'll know all kinds of stuff, but you can never ask. Like she said, the letter accommodations will be emailed if it's an online class, they'll be delivered in person. We keep copies of all of those. So if you're like, I know I got one for Joe, but I don't know what I did with it, you can call us, we can get you another copy.
Yep.
And then if the student offers to provide you with that medical documentation, really the less you know, the better. If they're like, here's my documentation, just be like, no, thank you, no, please, go give this to Autumn. We do tell them that they need to have their doctor send that to our office directly. We don't just generally handed over documents. But you definitely, as a faculty, your staff should never take those documents.
So that
Ever.
happened to me. you guys got it
Yep.
right, And I'm like, oh.
You did good,
That's what I
Susan.
told them to do.
You did
Yeah.
good.
I didn't even look. I said, here you go.
Yeah, you got a note right out of that. And so, remembering that's the case. We've also had some cases, and I'm going to go over this really quickly and I'm running out of time, but we have had some cases in the past where faculty will say, Joe needs a note taker because he has an accommodation. Does anybody in the class want
To the
do
whole
that?
class.
To the entire class. Please don't ever do that. That's calling out a student. That's a huge OCR violation. That's a huge no-no. Nothing will make a student drop a class and never want to take it again faster than that. And so, like she said, we're doing what we can to make our students feel comfortable, and part of the classroom experience as normal as can be for some students. So yes, just please don't do that. And then, so for you as faculty, like I said, don't ask students personal questions. Did we just over this?
Yeah.
We just did this. Why didn't it click?
No,
Apparently we had 2. There we go. So, again, referring students to AS, the student discloses a disability to you, for example. And so you can say, the student will come to you and say, I had a TBI when I was in high school, rolled a car or whatever. And I might need an accommodation. And you'd say, okay, well, let's go to the AS office in the library. If you don't know where we're located, if you go in the library, go straight down, turn left to the testing center, we're right there. The testing center serves as our intake because getting an administrative assistant is ridiculous. So we just use the testing center and it's all worked out perfect. So you can walk them over or send them over. Certainly you can send them to the website as well. If you notice a student is struggling in your class, a lot of faculty are just really tuned in with, I can tell that maybe they're not turning things in because they haven't had enough time or they're not understanding something. You can refer for that as well. And then really for any condition, even if you're not sure that it requires an accommodation, if you think the student would benefit from even a conversation, because sometimes Autumn and I will have conversations with students where we'll say, you know, you don't necessarily need accommodations, but maybe you could do this to study instead, or you could use this tool that doesn't necessarily need to come from us. And so having those conversations with us, we can hook them up with resources that don't necessarily require accommodations, but would be very helpful.
How does this relate to COVID? Students that had COVID and wanted proof and.
Legally can't do that.
Do home tests, so.
Yeah, that's a no-no. I would, if I were the student, I would have went straight to Andy Hansen. Because that's where that comes from. I mean, we can't require that they give us an obituary from the grandma either. So, same principle.
So when I was looking through the previous instructors thing, it says so many absences, and after that you would have to have a doctor's note to get it excused.
Yep.
Is that still an acceptable practice?
Yeah, so what we do, when we do approve the absence, we will actually email you directly. And so why we do that is because we want you to excuse it. We verified with the student that it is an actual.
But they should be sending that to you.
Yes,
not to
no,
give it to
no.
me.
And I know some faculty, and this is probably legally is that I'm not 1000% sure on, but I'm pretty confident. For that, it's for any student, right? So for students who have COVID, like I'm teaching SD 107, and I've had a couple kids who have said they've had it, and I just have to take it that they do. I have to take it as that somebody's grandma really died and they're going to be out for the funeral. It's the same thing with that. If you've missed a bunch of classes though because of a medical reason, that would be a good referral point. This would probably be a legal matter. You would have to talk with legal, but I don't think you could require a doctor's note for them to get credit. That seems like above and beyond what they would have to do. I mean, but that's probably a not me question.
What I do with the absences, so I do have faculty who have said, you know, it's a requirement in my class. So we're not, again, our accommodations don't alter the requirement. So if you give your mainstream students 4 absences and then it starts dropping their grade from an A to a B, then we would expect you to work with our student and come up with maybe a few, like instead of 4 for this student, because they have a documented disability and an accommodation that we've sent you, maybe you're going to give them 6 instead of 4, right? So you're going to work that out with your student during that process where we require them to come talk to you, because they may have a few extra absences, and it may be because they're, you know, depressed because they're away from home for the first time and they're in college and they just can't get out of bed and they're so overwhelmed, right? So there's multiple reasons.
We have a couple students on campus this semester who are getting treatment for cancer right now. So they miss classes because they have chemo,
Right.
or they had chemo the day before and it really just took a toll this time. And that's where those conversations again come in handy. But I mean, again, that would be a Brantley question, but I don't think we could legally say you missed class because of medical and you have to bring me a doctor's note. I don't think that would hold up.
But we're also not telling students that you
No.
can miss class. If you sign up for a
No.
face-to-face class,
You
we
have to
expect
go.
you to be going to your face-to-face.
We expect you to
class.
go and we expect you to turn in your homework.
And the we, in all of our sheets say, with an accommodation, you can still fail a course.
Yeah.
So again, it's not a net, it's not a crutch, it's to remove that barrier. And then if they're abusing it, you grade them accordingly. And we always say that. We always say, you need to give the student the grade they earned.
Yep, and that's what this slide is you don't have to tolerate that. Like if there's missing class, they're saying we'll have accommodations to miss class. Well, there's always some level to that. You can't just not come to class. That's not how that works. And then again, changing the core standards and the learning objectives, they all need to learn the same things because we're an accredited college and we have things we have to meet. So when in doubt, just always get a hold of us. You can call us, you can email us. We've been beefing up our website again. And so if you have questions, you might find the information there. You know, if we have to pick loyalties, you know, we really want to do the best for our students. We want to make sure the faculty and staff understand why we're doing and how we're doing and to work with them to do better for the students. And then clearly I really just don't want to get sued. So I like my job and I would like to keep it.
We can just cover these quick.
Yeah, so some of the things that
We're gonna see.
that you'll see is the testing cover sheet. So if you have a student who has an accommodation to come to testing center, we'll need you to fill that out. It just tells us what the student gets on the test and how long you would normally give for a student so we can accommodate those things. Paper tests can be hand delivered or emailed. We have that. If you need assistance adjusting time in Canvas, get a hold of your instructional designer and e-learning, and they can help you with that as well. But these are some of the things we see with alternative testing responsibilities. The occasional flexibility attendance, this is kind of what we were just talking about. They're aware that they can only use them when absolutely necessary. Once a month is roughly what we figure. A lot of times we do require they tell you within 24 hours if they can beforehand. They know that they've got a treatment or a doctor's appointment. They say I have this coming up. It will not, these accommodations will not stop a student from failing a course for not going to it. And then when there is a flex due date that's requested, the new date has to be determined and approved by the course instructor. They can't just say, well, I can turn stuff in late. Like, that's just not how it works. And all that stuff is spelled out on the form.
And that's the partnership though, that
yeah.
we're not, it's up to you guys. You guys hold the key, however many days you want to give them, but we typically say we give
Yeah.
you a
So
recommendation.
math, yeah, and
Just
math
a recommendation.
Math is a good example of this. So my husband's a math instructor at WSU, and he has a student in his class. I probably shouldn't talk about this, but we do, because he had a question and I'm his closest accessibility specialist. But he had a student in one of his classes who had an accommodation for extra time on assignments. But how he works it is he gives the assignment, a week later, he posts the solutions for the problems so that students can use that to study. Well, if a student has another week, now he's 2 weeks out. And so now he's having to push tests out. And so that's where, as a faculty member, he can push back a little bit and say, I can't give you a week, I can give you 3 days. And that would be where that conversation comes into play there. Resources, certainly us. We provide, there's on our website, there's a list of provider documents and different providers for you to get to that each students can use and that you can use. There's information, like I said, on there for you guys specific to our college. And then obviously our contact information is on there. And it's lcsc.edu/accessibility-services. So.
I don't know if you want to go.
No, I'm not going to go through this. We'll make this available and we have this on there. As you know, LC does not have a current syllabus addendum. So there's not something from the college that says you have to put these things in there. And so, but what we would recommend is that you check that information and make sure it's correct. We in e-learning are trying to catch those things as we go. Every semester, myself, the instructional designers, and Alex in IT, we go through every single class in our LMS manually to make sure there are syllabi in there. So when you get nasty letters from your chairs, that's our fault. Your syllabus isn't there. We've been trying to go through just really quickly because we have so many to go through just to look. And we're still finding syllabi that have the testing center in Sam Glen, which has not been the case since 2015. Accessibility services, for those of you who don't know, used to be under the counseling services and it was called disability services. We have changed the name, we have changed directors, and we have changed locations. And so all of those things need to be correct to be good for your students to use. So if you have a test, go to Sam Glen and see the testing center, that's not helpful. So we don't have one, but we have this on our website. So if you're wanting something to put in your syllabus, you can just go copy, paste, steal it. We're totally fine. Obviously, procedures are in place. Though we do have a policy for student disabilities accommodations. We do have a service and companion animal. This is actually, I'm going to go through this really quickly. I apologize. We have 3 policies for animals on our campus. The first is just animals. This says you can't have your dog in your car, you can't bring your dog in the building, and if you're on the campus with your dog in the grass, please clean up its poop. That's the first one. The second one is for service animals. Well, it's all looped into one here. Service and companion animals. So the therapy policy, we have 2 approved therapy animals on campus right now. Dobby in athletics and
The nursing one.
I don't remember its name now. It's a little pitty. It's really
pit
cute.
bull, super cute.
Super cute pitty. But yeah, so we have 2 right now that are approved. And you have to fill out paperwork. They have to go through citizens training. There's a process to that. And then they have to do the paperwork and then we let them be on campus. But then the 2 that we run into the most problem with the students is ESAs, which is emotional support animals. Those animals are only approved to be in their dorm rooms. when they're in the dorm rooms and just the rooms, not the apartments, just their dorm rooms, they have to follow certain things. So if somebody has a cat, they have to clean the cat box twice a day. The cat can only be out while the student's out, or the dog, or whatever the animal is, has to be in a kennel when the student's out of the room. There's this whole thing that we work with Res Life on to make sure that they're meeting those criteria. Service animals on campus and in the state of Idaho, and everywhere in the US, a student does not have to register a service animal. In the state of Idaho, a student can train their own service animal. So I can show up with little Benji and I can say, this is my service animal.
Yep.
All that you can ask is that a service animal and what function is performing? Those are the only two things you can ask. Anything above that could be an OCR violation. The student should be able to tell you, yes, this is my dog or cat, or, well, it can be a dog or a small horse. And I'm not kidding. That's the only two things a service animal could be, is a dog or a small horse, a miniature horse.
I
Yeah.
really hope someday. I
Right?
have a-
Really, I keep hoping we have one. We don't yet, but we do have some dogs on campus right now. So the dog has to be in control by the owner the whole time. So they can't break the dog to class and then everybody pet it.
Yep.
That's not what a service animal does. The animal has to be under control the whole time. They have to clean up after the animal. So if somebody's bringing a dog to your class and it's running all over and it's doing whatever it wants, you can let us know and I can be the bad guy and I'm perfectly happy doing that. So very specific what that animal can do, but it doesn't have to be registered. There's no national certification. There's not a state certification. There's not a registration. The dog is a service animal if that person says that dog's a service animal.
What happens if I have allergies and I can't have that small horse in my office?
We would work with the student to either have another option during the class, or we would find a room that's big enough that we could keep you far enough apart that it would be less of an issue. Or we would have that student, if there were another section, we'd have them move to that section, or we would make it an online option. At no point because like Rodney's a good example. So if he had a student in the kitchen who had a service animal, we would have to accommodate that animal in the kitchen. And we've done that. And so there's ways around things. But certainly, service animals are expected to be clean, kept up, vetted. There's certain things they have to do to get any animal on campus. And so we would expect that they would be dealing with some of that just through cleanliness too.
In our
So we would work
experience,
with you.
in our experience, we have had a few animals removed in the capacity of a service animal. So
And ESAs.
we have done that. So just know that, if the animal acts out in any capacity, we will address that and remove them as a service animal.
Yep. So then real quick, we are working on an electronic record system, which is also a notification system. Autumn and I have been working for about a year to get this implemented, and we are 2 people and we are doing 8 jobs. So it's just taking us a little longer than we thought. So, but it is coming. And when that comes up, we will certainly let you know, but that just essentially takes everything for us and puts it online. And then we are working on a Disability Support Alliance, which is going to be a student group for students with disabilities if they want to be part of that organization. It'll be a resource. We'll have meetings where they can learn different tools. And really it's just a way for them. We have a lot of people who just are anxious and don't want to meet people who aren't like them. And this kind of gives them that opportunity.
That's cool. So has that hasn't started yet?
No,
Or-
there used to be a committee, but it was never a student group. It was just a bunch of people who worked here talking about what we need to do around campus. And so we want this to be a student group that they can really take ownership in and run and make it what they need. So.
And network and get some friends, because
Right.
some of our students really struggle with that social aspect. So it's a brand new experience here, and it's new people and new faces, and
We're hoping to start that in spring. So,
That's wonderful. I'm really excited for it.
yeah,
it'll
be good.
comforts of their homes and their parents and their supports. So yeah, it's a transition for sure.
so there's a lot of information really quickly. Are there any questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm one of those professors who probably plans for disability anyway. So a lot of times when I get the accommodations in, and even a few weeks in, the students and I kind of laugh about it. Like, they're like, oh yeah, I don't need extra test time because we're not taking tests, and I can't record lectures because you don't lecture. And your stuff's posted 3 weeks ahead, so I don't need the notes ahead. So I keep kind of coming into that. But if we've had a past student where, again, the accommodations I was seeing aren't supporting them in that class, don't need them, or for whatever reason, But we still see something off. We can't ask them about it. In one case, I was thinking maybe a learning disability is at play. Super important for education and maybe even continuing, say, in the program or something like that. Is that just a conversation we have with you?
Yes, definitely. Those, and you can reach out to us and we can reach out to the students. We've actually done that in the past and we're happy to do that. We just call them in and we do a check-in meeting. How are things going? How are things in this class? You know, we've heard from some of your instructors, well, they still see that maybe you're struggling with this aspect. And how should we address that? How can we help you be successful? And those meetings are always well received.
And is that like, it can be a past student then, but that's still attending at LC?
Yep.
Okay.
And another reason why we like to meet with them every semester, right? Because again, it's a vulnerable group and we do like to check in. How are you doing? Have you made friends? How are things going? Do you need us to get you involved? Do you need resources? Do you need you to take you to the SSC, the LRC, student counseling? Do you need a peer mentor, right? Because a lot of students don't know about any of those things. And so it's another way to check in with that vulnerable group, retain, right? It's how we're doing our best to stretch that retain arm out. So that's why we meet with them, and we want to get to know our students. We want them to be successful, but we want them to do it.
Yeah.
And do you have good success reaching out to them and them like responding? Because that's the same thing too, right? You'll email an email or ask or suggest you go get tutoring over and over and then nothing gets done.
No,
We do have some of that. I mean, they're college students. So, I mean, that's inevitable. We have those people. But I mean, for the most part, I would say, 75% of our students, after we have those conversations, and of course I haven't crunched numbers, but when we have those conversations, like, oh yeah, I would definitely benefit from going to counseling or going to the tutors. I've just never been down there. And so us going down and, saying, this is Tim and Tim would love to get you involved in all the things. I mean, that helps huge. So.
Yep, I've done that a few this fall where they've come in tears and I've walked them down to the writing center. I start the conversation with the student and my student's like, oh, that's how easy it was. But that first step was really hard for them to take. And it's typically my freshmen who this is a brand new experience for them. And they haven't figured out really how to be the best college student they can be. And so we're just building those skills and we're learning, teaching them the ropes. So yes, we do get a lot of good feedback when we actually physically we lead that horse there and it really takes.
In the same regards, though, I mean, we have students who are on President's Honor Roll. We have students who are rocking scholarships. We have students doing really, really well just because they took the initiative to come in and get what they needed to be successful. So, yeah.
I have other students walking students to my office
Oh, the
now.
nurses.
So, and I really do feel like students are getting more comfortable with me, and that goes a long way towards their listening and they're utilizing the resources, and we have a relationship. So it's going really well, I think, for our students. But again, we just wanted you guys to feel like you can ask any questions and that we are accessible and that we're not sending students in telling you what to do. It's a partnership. We're just trying to turn that light bulb on to let you know that they have a different learning style, to meet them where they are. And these are the things that we recommend will increase their success.
And if you have questions that come up or if you have peers that have questions, just have them reach out. We clearly like to talk. Awesome.
Great.
I think it was great. Thank you guys for coming so much. Thanks, Christina.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Who wants to line up and have